Mitchell has his head up, takes LeVert. Oh, my! Donovan!
Get that weak stuff out of here!
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. I'm your host, Tony Pesta, joined by Jackson Flickinger. You can find all of our work for Write Down Euclid and Fear the Sword in the links below in the description. The Cleveland Cavaliers went to Paris and notched a wire-to-wire victory over the Brooklyn Nets. They now stand 22-15, fourth in the Eastern Conference. Jackson, let's just start off with the big game in Paris. What's your takeaway from that?
It definitely was a good win. I wouldn't say it was a great win just because I thought it was kind of an ugly game, kind of a weird game, which is what you expect from a game that, you know, the Cavs went to Paris right after their game on Sunday afternoon and have been doing, if you've been following them on social media, they've just been doing lots of stuff that has nothing to do with basketball. Isaac Okoro's doing some absolutely awful drawings.
The social media team has been on fire.
It's kind of a game that I expected. It was pretty sloppy. They were fouling Tristan Thompson, sending him, doing a hack at Tristan Thompson. It was an ugly game. Jarrett Allen, you just mentioned Jarrett Allen had a good game, and he did have a good game, but he took 5 shots. He went 3 for 5 from the field with 12 points. He had a great defensive game, but he didn't do
every
anything.
time he caught the ball, they were just tackling him. They're like, don't let this guy shoot.
Right. So it was just kind of a weird game. Donovan Mitchell, this is one of those games where the Cavs had the best player on the court, so they ended up, winning because the best player did best player things. Donovan Mitchell had 45 points. He played like he wanted to have a bunch of kids in Paris buy his ugly shoes, and hopefully they will from that. So
I have 2 pairs of his ugly shoes. So
you do.
Yeah. Well, you know what? At the Dick's Outlet store, they're really cheap. So they're solid basketball shoes. So, and I'm a Spider-Man fan. I had to buy the Spider-Man colorway. It all adds up.
Okay, because I think
we're balling on a budget.
Hopefully he was able to push that. Hopefully inspired some 12-year-olds to buy shoes that look like they were made for 12-year-olds. 15 for 30 from the field. That's a lot of shots, but it's
very efficient.
They needed it. Max Strus went out. You got a really tough game from Sam Merrill. 2 for 12 from the field, 2 for 11 from distance. You love that he's shooting, but he just certainly didn't have it. Nobody else really did either. Caris LeVert 5 for 14. That's kind of the stereotypical Caris LeVert game. So they really needed a punch today, and Donovan Mitchell provided that. So I think this is why you want to have someone like Donovan Mitchell, and this is why I think this was a good example of why the Nets really want somebody like Donovan Mitchell, because they don't have that guy. And then you look at the guys that they do have, and the guys that they could trade these players for Donovan Mitchell, and it's this is why you don't want those players, because they can't just go out and win you a game. Mikal Bridges, he had a great game, but he wasn't somebody who's okay, he has the ball, he's just going to dominate and just will this team to victory, because that's not the player that he is.
Yeah, one of my favorite Twitter follows, Kolb on Twitter, said, this game shows you why the Nets really want someone like Donovan Mitchell and why the Cavs don't really want anyone on the Nets. Because, listen, you said it was an ugly game, and I agree. I'm not a big sports bettor, but today I decided to bet on the over for this game, and became apparent very quickly that I was not going to hit that parlay. I think the Nets, with 3 minutes left in the first quarter, had 6 points as a team, and I was like, yeah, this one, there goes $5 for me. But Donovan Mitchell, I think he entered this game with 2 clear goals in mind. He wanted to put on a show very clearly, and he wanted to get the win. And he got, I would say, mission accomplished. He came out with so much energy right away, steals, fast break, scoring in transition. And then later in the game, when the Cavs kind of slowed down and it seemed like the Nets might be able to crawl back into it, it was Donovan Mitchell who delivered the final nails in the coffin with a couple incredible 3-pointers, heavily contested. He's just a special player. This 45-point performance was his season high. He also had 12 rebounds, 1 shy of his career high. It's his 16th game scoring 40-plus in a Cavs uniform, which is pretty incredible. Jackson, what's your overall impression of Donovan Mitchell's season so far? Because he has regressed a little bit in terms of that three-point shooting just from the start, but clearly he's still capable of doing everything we saw last year.
I think, like, when you're talking about Donovan Mitchell, like, looking at the numbers per se doesn't really paint the whole picture, especially this season where, you know, we were talking a few weeks ago and it was like the Cavs are 500. They lost their two of their three best players. The season could be over. Like, maybe if the Cavs tread water and hang around 500, and when they get Garland and Mobley back, then they can kind of make a push to not be in the play-in. And they are now with the win. What are they, 9-3?
Yep, 9-3 since that news that Mobley and Garland would be out.
They've had, I haven't looked at it after this game, but they had a top 5 offense in that stretch, shooting the most threes, playing a brand of basketball that I think really suits them. So it's like, you know, sure, Donovan Mitchell's pull-up three-point shots aren't going in like they were last season when he was like, I think he was like 4th or 5th behind like Curry and just
he was incredible.
Elite shooters, you know. And so you kind of knew that wasn't going to keep going forever, and it hasn't. But it's like Donovan Mitchell's playing the way that they need him to play. This is how he needed to play for them to get a win today. And we look at, you know, I think on Sunday, he took a little bit of a back seat to guys like Harris LeVert and Sam Merrill, who both had it going that game. He took a back seat. He became more of a distributor, and they won the game. And then today, Harris LeVert and Sam Merrill did not have it going from a scoring perspective, and he said, okay, fine, I will do that. And he did it. And one of the things that I think is really sneaky is the amount of steals that he has. Today, he had 4 steals. He's second in the league in steals per game. So it's like steals don't mean you're playing good defense, but a defense like this, you need steals because, you know, your best, I think like Isaac Okoro, somebody who is their best perimeter defender, but he doesn't get steals. And it's just one of the ways that they've been supplementing their offense and defense with guys down. You look at their offensive rebounding, they're getting a ton of offensive rebounding, especially Jarrett Allen. So these little things are what is allowing this Cavs team to stay competitive through all of this. So, like, yeah, sure, he's not shooting the 3 ball very well, but I think overall he's doing what this team needs. And today was another case of that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, you know, I'm glad you mentioned the steals because I think this is probably the best defensive season Mitchell has had. That doesn't mean he's an incredible defender. And of course, steals don't translate to being a great defender. There are times where Mitchell maybe puts the Cavs defense in a bad position because he gambled for a steal. But today was a great example of how those steals really added up. I mean, they set the tone defensively early on in this game behind those, you know, Mitchell breaking up plays and taking them the other way for a quick bucket. And Mitchell really, whether it be turning it up defensively in certain games or taking on the role of the playmaker, or in games where he realizes he needs to score 40 this season, he's been able to do that pretty consistently. Whatever this Cavs team needs from him, he's been able to bring it. And so that's why it shouldn't really come as a surprise that reports continue to come out that the Cavs have zero interest in trading Donovan Mitchell, because why would you? We don't need to get into that whole conversation again because it's just the same thing over and over. But I did want to mention that report that the Cavs do not have any interest trading Donovan Mitchell as of right now. Another guy who has been playing great recently, he recorded his 8th straight double-double tonight, and Jackson is gone. Just for the viewers to know, we hear you. We know Jackson's having some webcam issues. He's trying his best to get it resolved today. We are recording off of his phone. So
okay, so I bought a new webcam, and it actually glitches worse than my computer cam. So
much worse.
So we said, hey, I'm tired of getting bullied. I went on Locked On Cavs. Chris bullied me. He gave this like 10-minute disclaimer, like, all right, guys, like the webcam was not great. What are we gonna do? But so I tried, and here we are. So sorry about that.
He's doing his best. All right.
Yeah.
You know, we're making it work with what we got. Also, happy belated birthday, Jackson. If anyone wants to send him a new webcam for his birthday, please, we'll set up a PO box.
do not send me a new webcam. I don't know if you were listening.
Send them a whole
Tony.
new computer.
Send me a new computer. Yeah, send me a new computer.
Well, that's asking for a bit much, you know.
Well,
So
you know, if you're gonna complain, at least put your, do something about it.
It's true. And you know what? The Cavs have been asking Jarrett Allen for a bit much with these recent injuries. You're gonna mess up my transition.
No, because I didn't want to transition. I still had something more to say.
Okay.
Well, I was gonna say one of the things that I think this stretch shows is how and really I could have made this point after your transition. But I think what the stretch shows is how good these players are when they're like maximized in their roles. Like the Cavs have really gone all in on kind of like the Utah Jazz model, and kind of like a poor man's Utah Jazz model where like Jarrett Allen's not as good of a defensive player as Rudy Gobert. They don't have as good a shooters as the Jazz have, but like Donovan Mitchell can make it work and make it work really well when he's the primary ball handler. He's initiating things. He's getting downhill. The offense is good, and he's improved, I think, in getting Jarrett Allen involved. His bigs, I think he's doing a much better job at that. I don't know if today was a great example of that. He had a couple bad passes trying to throw it over the top of the defense, which weren't ever going to work. But I think it just shows that this team, when they maximize their best players, is really good. The problem is their four best players don't maximize each other. And that's where, when you're talking about, like, should we trade Allen, should we trade Mitchell, you're never going to get as good of players back because these guys are really, really good. It's just getting them maximized when they're not, when they're all healthy. That's been the problem, and that will continue to be the problem.
Yeah, and I think since from the moment we added Mitchell to this team, I think it became clear that the Utah Jazz model was maybe the superior way to build around a player like Mitchell rather than what the Cavs have been trying to do. And so, just as Jackson set the tone defensively by cutting off my transition, Jarrett Allen set the tone defensively tonight. One of his better defensive games of the year. He had 4 blocks, 2 steals. He was really just dominant on that end of the floor. And this Cavs team, since the injuries, they've become more of an offensive-oriented team, but they have still shown that in stretches, especially when Allen is out there playing the way that he has been, they can still lock in defensively, and that's going to be really important to whatever this Cavs team becomes when they're at full strength. Hopefully they manage to replicate some of the style they're playing right now, but they also still need to hang their hat on the defensive end because that has always been where they're strongest. Their weakness, their downfall has always been not being able to score enough points. So if they can finally manage to blend these two styles and kind of be this grit and grind, pace and space team, if they can finally make those two contrasting styles blend, then we're going to look at a Cavs team that can really make some noise in the playoffs against, the lesser half of the Eastern Conference. I still wouldn't pick them to go toe-to-toe with Boston or Milwaukee, but this is where we could see them actually start to put something together and give us something to feel encouraged by heading into the offseason.
What if the Bucks just kind of suck? So that's something I think to keep in mind. I think the Bucks suck, but I don't. The Celtics, they're not in the same.
The Celtics, that's looking like a scary team. But the Cavs, for whatever reason, seem to match up well against them. So we'll talk about that later in the episode. We're going to talk about where the Cavs stand right now. I did want to talk about Jarrett Allen, but I feel like we covered a lot of that in the last episode. I don't know how much new stuff. Do you have anything else that you would like to add on Allen's recent success?
I think it just kind of highlights how having a center like Jarrett Allen can really just put everything in line defensively. And they're definitely not as good of a defensive team if you're just looking at like half court, their set defense. It's certainly not the same without Mobley and Allen both there. I think you really have a really high floor. But one of the things that we've kind of seen over this stretch is that when the Cavs are playing a competent style of offense, it makes playing defense a lot easier when you're not, constantly trying to play defense off of misses. You can, set up your defense more. So I think that's always like when we talk about basketball, there's like, we want to sometimes just talk about the offense or just talk about the defense, but there's a push and
they
pull.
impact each other.
Right. So, like, I think that's where it's like, if you want the Cavs defense to really be good, you've got to maximize the Mobley Allen offensive minutes, because when they get slow and in the mud on offense, they kind of get that way on defense too. So it's, you can't have one without the other. So I think this, like, Allen by himself with this team, you can have a good defense, and you can have a better defense with Allen and Mobley, but can the offense still, be the type of style that they have been?
Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, right? Is the saying there.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work exactly that way, because the Indiana
Right.
Pacers are a great example of that. But I definitely get what you're saying. I think this is something we talked about last year at times too, where it's like sometimes loosening that grip defensively and becoming more of a pace and space team will actually, because it's that push and pull dynamic, it actually can benefit your defense in a way, because you're not playing from behind, you're not playing in transition as much.
Well, one thing that's really interesting is that, like, you say pace and space, but, like, the pace hasn't gone up. I think it might have actually gone down. Don't quote me on that, but the pace
from last season, are you saying?
No, from like pre the injuries. Like,
Okay.
the pace,
Yeah,
like,
I don't know about that. They are playing at a faster pace from last year. I know. I'm not sure
Well, they were
since the
30th
injuries.
last year, but they're
Yeah.
I think they were still like 26, because I was looking it up for, like, an article. Like, they're not playing with, like, a huge pace, but they're playing with space.
They're shooting a lot more.
Yeah, so it's like they're not playing with, like, a crazy pace or anything like that, but what they are doing is they're shooting the most threes in the league. So when you're shooting the most threes in the league and you're getting into your offense, you're not, like, slow walking it up the court, where that's something that I think they really emphasized last year, or at least Darius Garland. John always says that, because he listens, so we have to talk to him. He always would complain on Twitter about how Darius would just walk it up the court when JB would be, like, waving him to go.
Yeah.
I always got the impression that they wanted to play slower so they can kind of set their defense more. But it's like, if they start playing a little faster and they're actually shooting threes, like if they stay at this pace and they shoot threes, you would think that the offense should even out kind of, but I don't know. It's just really tough when you have somebody like Evan Mobley out there as opposed to Dean Wade, even though Evan Mobley is a way better player. And Dean Wade does a lot of cardio when he's out there, especially on the offensive end.
He was doing the Tour de France today. Yeah, I think he had one field goal attempt.
He had one field goal attempt? How did I miss that? Wow. One field goal attempt in 27
Blink and you miss it, man.
That's tough. But even, like, somebody like him, where you do have to somewhat respect him on the 3-point line in a way that, like, teams, if
you could leave Mobley.
Evan Mobley in the corner, his guy's standing on the block. So, and with Dean Wade, they're not doing that, even though maybe I think in a playoff setting they would do that, because, well, we know in a playoff setting they did that. The Knicks did that, and that's why he didn't play. But in the regular season, you're seeing when teams are covering him that, wow, this offense does have some type of movement to it.
Yeah, I think we should do an entire episode discussing what this offense is going to look like when Mobley and Garland are back together, because I think that's something really interesting that we could go in depth in. I guess just to very quickly touch on it, the hope would be that since right now you're playing a lot of Allen and Okoro together, and Okoro isn't exactly someone who gets a lot of defensive attention on the perimeter, maybe by using the same style and using Mobley or Allen and a lot of these dribble handoffs and then the short roll, all that's the goal. But we'll talk about that in depth maybe next episode. I do want to quickly hit on the bench production, because you're talking about the increase in 3-point shooting, and a big reason for that is the players who have stepped in off the bench, including Sam Merrill. The Cavs bench since over their last 15 games is, I had the stat somewhere. They're fourth in scoring, fourth in points per game over the last 15 games. They're first in 3-point makes per game with 8 each game, and second place is 5.9. So they're really shooting the ball, and Sam Merrill is the biggest reason for that. But you also have Niang, Levert. What is your take on the Cavs bench?
I've talked about Sam Merrill enough, so I'm not gonna talk about that and how his 3-point shooting is helpful. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that you're getting Karis LeVert in a more natural role where he's not necessarily like shooting a lot of the threes, but he's setting up a lot of threes. And when he's playing more with like, because you're getting a lot of minutes with just Karis LeVert and not Donovan Mitchell, and obviously no Darius Garland. When you get those minutes with LeVert and or Mitchell or Garland, you get a lot of, you know, LeVert playing off ball, and then when he catches it, kind of dribbling it some more. And you get like, it feels like the offense isn't as optimized as what you're kind of seeing now with these bench units, where you're getting LeVert and he's looking for guys like Niang, Merrill, you know, Strus is out there a lot of times. So he's like looking for these 3-point shooters, and really like his ability to get inside the lane and then kick out to those shooters is really, you know, is really an underrated part of why this bench has been such a good 3-point shooting team and why they're getting up so many shots. And that's one of the things that if he's playing with Garland in those bench units, are they able to actually do that the same way? Because LeVert isn't somebody who, he does take and make threes, but that's not what he's most comfortable doing. So that's where I think when we talk about the bench production, it's more than like, well, can they find minutes for Sam Merrill and Niang and Wade when everyone's back? It's more so like, well, how does LeVert transition? Does he transition into taking more threes? Because if he kind of keeps playing the same way, but he's always playing as like a second guard, I don't think that you're going to still get the same 3-point shooting that you're getting now.
I agree with everything you said there. I think LeVert has been overall playing about as well as you could reasonably expect from him. And I think it's mainly because he is dominating that playmaking role, or just on-ball role with the bench because of these injuries. Once Garland is back in the lineup, that's where maybe this becomes a little more difficult. And, you know, a lot of people want Craig Porter Jr. to play a lot of minutes here, and I'm one of them. I do want to see him play, but I think the challenge is that Karis LeVert is not great off ball, even with the improvements he's made. And Craig Porter Jr. is also not very good off ball. And so when you have both of them on the floor, one of them is just kind of out there, not really being a threat on offense. And I think it's part of the reason why, you know, last year when Ricky Rubio was here, the Ricky Rubio LeVert minutes did not go very well either, because neither of those guys are good without the ball. And so I think the reality is, with how LeVert has been playing, it's kind of hard to get Craig Porter Jr. out there too, because you don't want to take Karis LeVert out of whatever flow he's been in some of these recent games by throwing Porter out there. And when they are both out there together, it's just not as good of a lineup as you would want. So I did just want to touch on that and maybe explain why Craig Porter Jr. hasn't been playing as much. But speaking of Darius Garland, I'll let you respond to that. Actually,
I do think today would have been a good time to get Craig Porter Jr. some minutes, especially
with
in the
Strus
second half. After Strus was out, I thought that he should have got minutes, kind of where Sam Merrill's been getting minutes, like end of the third, beginning of the fourth. And that's kind of a time where, when Sam's shot wasn't falling, I think he's still a very helpful player because his movement still creates opportunities. But they needed somebody who could kind of like, all right, like, I'm going to force the issue. And it felt like they were on their back heel, especially when they started doing like the Tristan Thompson fouls. It felt like they really, from that point to like kind of like midway through the fourth, they just kind of felt like they were just stuck in neutral. And I think that's where like Craig Porter Jr. is a really good, like, get you out of neutral. So I think he could have got minutes there, but like, the Cavs are 9-3 without Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. So it's like, I think like people get mad at JB and we get mad at JB. But when you're talking about like rotations and stuff, like, I don't know if you can get mad now when they're winning without their, two of their three most talented players.
Yeah, well said. I agree 100%. The main reason why I brought that up was to defend JB a little bit, because I know some fans really, really want to see Craig, and I want to see him play too. But, I mentioned when all these injuries happened, and JB, just a month ago, JB was really on the hot seat, it felt like. And I said, hey, with all these injuries, if JB manages to coach them through it, maybe it saves his job. And up to this point, I'm thinking JB might have just saved it himself for the rest of the season. Now, afterwards, after the playoffs, we'll see what happens. But up to this point, he's gotten the absolute most out of this bench. And hopefully, everything that he's learning right now, from the way that they're using Jarrett Allen to Donovan Mitchell's role and the way the bench is playing, these new weapons that he's found in Sam Merrill and even Porter. Hopefully that's going to translate to when this team is at full strength, and we'll see how many adjustments JB can make now, because this team is very redundant. They have a lot of, overlapping talents, but they certainly have more depth than they did last year, I think. And so JB really, he's gotten the most out of it during this stretch where they're all injured. When he has his full arsenal available, I'm excited to see if he's able to hold up to this and actually make adjustments and put the Cavs in a position to reach their potential.
One of the things that I think is really important in this conversation is I think sometimes it's been framed a little bit like, oh, JB just discovered the 3-point line, which maybe, but he was in the preseason. He was talking about how he wanted this team to shoot like 53s a game. So, and they did in the preseason, but then once they all got on the floor together in regular season, they were like 31 is fine. So like, how do they, one of the reasons why they haven't been shooting a lot of threes is Darius Garland is really hesitant to shoot threes. And, I think there's some limitations when you have him on ball not shooting threes and Donovan Mitchell off ball, because you kind of, like Donovan Mitchell on ball is very okay with shooting pull-up threes. It's like, can he get buy-in from Darius Garland to play this style when the Cavs are fully healthy? Like, and I think that's something that's really important and something that we should kind of keep an eye on, because when we talk about JB, I think we talk about him really being a good culture setter and being somebody who gets his players to buy in. And it's like, well, if you are that type of guy, you need to get your best, like one of your best players, your point guard, to buy into this new system. And can he do that? And if JB can't do that, then you need to get somebody in there who can, because that is JB's strength. So they say with coaches that like your strength is what gets you hired, but it's also what gets you fired. And it's like, once JB can't get his guys to buy into what he's selling, then, that's when his time is probably up. But it's a lot easier to get them to buy into something when you can say, hey, we were 9-3 in this stretch, or, whatever they end up being. Hey, like this style of play really works. And if you come in and try to play that style of play, then that really works. And I don't want to blame this all on Darius, because I think there's a lot of issues. Maybe his hand seemed like it was an issue all season, and that could have affected his shot, and his shot wasn't going in. So it's not like,
he's not the type to press it when his shot isn't falling.
Right. He wasn't shooting 40% on 3 shots a game. He was shooting like not 40%. So he wasn't shooting good. So it's, there's a lot of factors that we don't really know about, but if he can get this team to buy into this playing style when everyone's healthy, that's a scary team.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I do think when JB was on the hot seat, it felt like maybe the Cavs were starting to stray away from his message. Maybe they weren't listening to him in the same way. But now what this stretch is really done is like JB can be like, hey, we were 9-3 when Sam Merrill and some of these undrafted guys were out there balling and shooting 3-pointers. So like, again, this isn't to blame Darius Garland or anything, but like, Darius, if this is going to work, you got to shoot more threes. Like he's attempting 5.2 a game. That's almost identical to what he was attempting in his rookie season. And of course, the hand injury, I think, played a role. I think the fact that he wasn't hitting shots, he becomes a little gun shy and tries to do other things when the shot isn't falling. But like, there's almost like, I want to say Darius should be attempting like 8 3-pointers a game, honestly. Like I think his career high is 6.7. I was just looking at it. He could bump that up to like 8 a game. I mean, he is such a talented shooter. And even if the shot isn't falling at that 40% clip, I mean, you just got to get those shots up. Like anytime the defense is in drop, Darius Garland should be shooting a pull-up 3. But we can talk all about that in the next episode, because it's going to be a reoccurring theme, I'm sure.
Somebody move off ball. One of Darius or Donovan.
It would be great. Let's transition now into where did the Cavs stand right now in the Eastern Conference. They are 4th in the East, and they're a game and a half back from the 3rd seed, the Philadelphia 76ers. Do you think they can catch that 3rd seed position?
Maybe. It's tough just because when you look at the standings, there's a lot of teams in a very small, like, that aren't really separated too much. So like one loss can get you back into the play-in conversation right now. And I think that it's going to separate a little bit. It'll be interesting to see, like, the Knicks won't stop winning after they made the OG trade. So I don't know if that's going to just keep going forever. I haven't really watched enough Knicks after the trade, but so it's like I guess it's a possibility, but I wouldn't really. I think last year after the All-Star break, the Cavs had a really good chance of getting a top 3 seed. And then they dropped a couple games that they really shouldn't have, and they settled for 4. Right now, I think that with how bunched up the standings are, yes, their goal should be the 3rd seed. But I think if you got the 4th seed, that's a successful season, given everything that's happened.
Yeah, that's exactly where I stand. I think it's good thing that you mentioned that the standings are so bunched up that yes, they're very close to the 3rd seed. They could also drop to the play-in after a week of a couple games not going their way. So don't want to overreact to anything at this moment, but the fact that they have not just stayed above water during these injuries, but kind of gained ground in the standings is really encouraging. Some of this is going to be almost out of their control because it just comes down to, like, are the Knicks going to just keep winning games? Or are the 76ers going to keep establishing themselves as a top 3 team? Regardless, I think being in that 4-5 matchup is where their goal should be. It's very obtainable. I think they don't really, assuming that we don't get hit with another wave of injuries, they don't have too many excuses not to finish in that top 4-5 range with how they've played. And that would put them right where you need to be to, again, what we've said from the start of the year, just want to see them show something in the playoffs. And that 4-5 matchup usually is about as even as it can get. They're not going to, it's unlikely they're going to be super outmatched in that 4-5 matchup. I don't see them playing Boston there. So they should be able to show something in that matchup. And that's really what you want to see. So, one thing's for sure, I think they gained a lot of new fans today with their performance in Paris. So we welcome all the new fans into Cavs Nation.
Yeah, hopefully they're enjoying those nice Adidas Donovan Mitchell shoes that they probably bought right after the game.
It's a shame that they were robbed of a Sam Merrill masterclass. It felt like maybe it could have been his night. It started off a little promising and then just had a couple shots that he typically seems to make, just didn't drop tonight. But they still got a 45-point performance from 45. So what more can you ask for?
Well, Sam's saving it for when he starts on Monday with Max Strus being out. He's saving it for that. He's going to have a great game. Chris Manning's going to be really happy about that. So it's going to be great.
I agree. That's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. I want to thank everyone for watching or listening. Please stick with us while Jackson figures out his webcam issues. We are trying our best. Consider subscribing and sticking around. Follow Jackson on his journey through all of Amazon's most highly rated products, and go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Brian, help me get a laptop.